Hello, everyone. Welcome to Justice Redesigned, where we spotlight justice systems that work, expose those that don't, and explore actionable solutions for systemic change. I'm Steve Teskey, retired judge from the Metro Atlanta area. And before that, a trial attorney, before that, in law enforcement. We focus on personal narratives here, expert analysis with a commitment to fostering equity and fairness. And I ask my listeners to reimagine what justice can and should be. Today, I'm very excited to have with me Judge Julius Corpening II, also affectionately known by those in his community and his friends and colleagues as Jay. Now, he serves as the Chief District Court Judge for North Carolina's 5th Judicial District, encompassing New Hanover and Pender counties. And he was appointed, I believe you said, in 1991 by the governor. Is that right?
Appointed by Governor Martin in 1991.
Okay. And now after that, you were appointed. I guess that was to fill maybe uh, a term that had not been fully finished by your predecessor.
Exactly right. We had a judge who retired midterm, and I served that term, and I've run every 4 years since then, and was just elected to my ninth term.
Wow. Okay, so that's we're talking about over 3 decades in the judiciary. Is that right?
I'm in my 34th year right now.
Okay, so now before you did that, let's go back some time. I have noted here in 1983, at least you started or was involved in what I understand is a GAL attorney advocate. Is that correct?
That's correct, Steve. North Carolina adopted the guardian ad litem model in 1983. Some states, it's CASA, court-appointed special advocates. North Carolina chose the guardian ad litem model, and I became one of the first attorney advocates in North Carolina for the guardian ad litem program. Spent 8 years as a contract attorney for the program until I went on the bench in 1991. Interesting note about the growth of that program in 1983. I was a contract attorney, and we had one guardian ad litem. We now have a full-time staff attorney and a contract lawyer, and we have over 100 volunteers in my two counties.
Wow. Well, I want to stay on that because you you were attorney, but as a judge, you also became very active off the bench in cultivating that. Is that correct?
That's right. As you and I have talked about before, some of our most important work comes off the bench. Not to minimize what we do on the bench, but getting out into our community and actually helping create systemic change makes a difference for our people and can help keep our people out of court, which is sometimes more important than what we actually do in court.
And I'm glad you brought up, off the bench because that is the primary reason I wanted you on the show is because of your extraordinary and innovative work off the bench that, you know, I have said in the past, I think that the due process we deliver on the bench has a lot to do with the quality of our work off the bench. And you are, in my eyes, a just prime number one example of that, even to the extent that I think they, in the, I want to tell my viewers, they may not know this, but there's, for those who don't know, on the dependency side where kids are alleged to be neglected and abused, okay, and they have to be taken into custody by the state, there is a program called CASA, Court Appointed Special Advocates. It was created by a judge out in Washington, the state of Washington, David Suka. And it's my understanding, Jay, that I think it was 2018 that they recognized you, okay? And I think you got the Judge of the Year award by the National CASA program. Is that right?
I did. It was surreal, Steve. My local guardian ad litem program nominated me as an innovator, and next thing I know, I'm getting a call from the national organization saying that I had been selected. I did not know I had been nominated. And to fly to Boston and walk out on that stage and to receive that award was one of the greatest honors of my career.
Oh, yeah. I could imagine. I want my viewers to know this as a former judge. Okay, we all. I mean, in the juvenile world, dealing with dependency cases, when he said surreal. Okay, this is this is an honor that is not bestowed upon many judges. Only those who have done very innovative work in ensuring that the voice of all children in foster care are brought out in the courtroom. Would you say that I described that correctly?
I think that's accurate, Steve. From my perspective, the work we do in dependency court is the most important work that happens in our court systems because it's a place where we actually can touch and change lives, where we can actually have an opportunity to instill hope, to bring light to the darkness in people's lives, and there are just not many other courts where that can happen.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And before we move on into some meat of the subject in terms of what I'm going to, for my viewers' sake, this work off the bench is a conversation about a phrase that is used, and that phrase being judicial leadership. What is judicial leadership? What does it look like? And that's what I want Judge Corpening to speak to you about. Now, with that said, before we move on, I believe that you were also recognized, you were elected as vice president of the North Carolina Bar Association, right?
I'm a district court representative on the Bar Association this year. Uh, they try to have judicial representatives on the bar so that we can bring court system issues to the North Carolina Bar Association and then take issues back to our judges associations. I'm just over halfway through my year as in my term as vice president.
Wonderful. Glad. Well, so let me ask you this for the viewers a little bit more before we leave regarding what you do. What are the type of cases that you preside over?
So in my career, I've done everything that happens in district court. So we have criminal courts for misdemeanors. We take some felony jurisdiction for guilty pleas, domestic violence, child support, family courts. Juvenile court, though, has always been my interest dating back to the 80s when I got my start with the guardian ad litem program. We became a family court district here in the year 2000, and the three family court judges began to do case assignment for our dependency cases in juvenile court, which brought consistency to those families. That was what we were doing in family court, and we just really made juvenile a part of family court by doing that. In 2014, I realized that as chief, I could actually assign myself to do what I wanted to do. And so I assigned myself full time to the juvenile dependency and our juvenile justice caseloads. So
Okay.
for the last 11 years, I have exclusively heard dependency, child welfare cases, and our juvenile justice caseload.
Okay. But let me ask you this. What inspired you? This is a compound question. What inspired you to go into the law and later become a judge?
So, fascinating story about what inspired me to go into law. It was masterful parenting on the part of my father. I was a biology major in college, published, co-author with my advisor. Title of our publication was "Feeding Energetics of the Eastern Tree Squirrels." That, that title just gets you right at hello. Um, and my dad was a little concerned that I might spend the rest of my life in a fire tower somewhere out in the woods. And uh, Dad worked at Wake Forest at the time where I was in undergraduate school and invited me to lunch at the upscale dining option for students and faculty. Said he'd buy. Of course, I'd go to lunch with Dad. And and he asked me if I had given any thought to law school, and I said, "No, Dad. You know I haven't because I'm looking at going to forestry school at Duke." And he said, "Well, you know, are you open to thinking about it and maybe go interview with Dean Bowman at Wake Law, and then if you feel so led, take the LSAT and see how you score, and then give it consideration." Well, that sounded fair enough to me. Of course, I didn't know it was a total setup. Because of course, Dad had talked to Dean Bowman, and in my interview with Dean Bowman, he went to great lengths to tell me how my science background would serve me well in law school, because it's not so much what you've learned in college that helps you in law school, but it's how you've learned to learn,
Right.
how you can digest massive amounts of information in short periods of time. And it made sense to me. He said, and your science background will help you with that. Okay. And then he went on to tell me about the opportunities in environmental law, and then the hook was set. And talked to me about all the different opportunities in areas of law where my science background might be a good fit, and how I would be, an attractive hire to somebody with my biology background and with my science brain. And I left the interview thinking, okay, well, I'm going to take the LSAT, and then here I am. The story about what led me to want to be a judge is a little more serious. I was trying a custody case against a good friend lawyer. We were representing two really good parents who just couldn't agree on who was going to have the kids most of the time. Couldn't agree on whether to split time. They just couldn't agree, but they were really good people and good parents. And we got to the end of that case, and the judge who was trying it looked out at us and said, "Y'all may think this is important, but I don't care." That was in the spring of 1988. I remember it like it was yesterday. I left that courtroom. I walked up the 2 blocks to my office that I shared with my law partner, Carlton Prickett. I slammed the front door. I slammed the door to my office. Uncharacteristically, he came downstairs to check on me to find out what was wrong. I shared it with him. He marched down the street, confronted the judge, who doubled down on the "I don't care." And I decided that day that I wanted to be a judge.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a couple of vacancies for me to get an appointment, because I had some really good friends who were also wanting to be judges, and I wasn't going to compete with one of my best friends. And so when Judge Gil Burnett announced his plans to retire in 1991, he announced it sometime in 1990. I threw down and said, "My turn. I'm going to do this." And but that's why I became a judge, because that can't be. It's not okay for the person who wears the black robe to sit at the front of the room and say, "I don't care." It is not okay. And so I have made it my passion to care every single day for the last 33 and a half years.
Wow. Wow. Are you familiar with I believe it's the law professor. I think I may be getting this wrong, so no one hold me on it. Yale, Tom Tyler, um, if I'm getting his name correct, but he's deemed or dubbed like the father of the concept of procedural fairness, um, which I have dubbed it as due process on steroids. Okay, are you
So
familiar?
I've heard the name, and and for me, the procedural due process has transformed to be called trauma informed court.
Yeah, could you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure, everybody that comes to me, sometimes including the lawyers and court personnel, have experienced trauma. Um, and I started learning more about trauma maybe 10 or 12 years ago, and realized that how I spoke to people, how I listened to people, the words that I use in court have an impact on people. And they have different impacts on people who've experienced trauma, particularly people who have experienced significant long term trauma, childhood trauma, domestic violence, sexual violence over a period of time, because we know now that trauma changes the brain and the body. And if we are going to have better outcomes with our families, we've got to recognize what's driving behavior. And that anxiousness, that unsettledness in the courtroom isn't disrespect. It's they have anxiety because of where they're sitting. And if I can't be sensitive to that and recognize that there's something that's causing it, then I'm not going to get anywhere with them. They're not going to hear anything that I say. And so I spent my DA Ben David, who you met when you were here. Ben retired last year, has been a great partner. Ben and I helped start a resilience task force here more than 10 years ago, and screened the movie Resilience, and then participated in several rounds of trauma-informed communities work with the Duke Center for Child and Family Health, which is part of the Child Traumatic Stress Network. And through those hours and hours of training, really just came to have a better comfort level with how I act and how I talk in the courtroom. I actually like myself a whole lot better now than the Jay from the 1990s. Merged into that in 2021, and we can circle back to this if you want to in a minute, because I know you want to talk about school justice partnerships. But Ben David pitched the idea of an ACEs Informed Courts Task Force to our Chief Justice, Paul Newby. And in 2021, we embarked on a 2-year journey to transform our entire court system on issue of childhood trauma and other sources of trauma. I'll say we wrapped up some really good work December 2023, but we're still doing the work. We got the band back together again last month for a check-in on other work that's going on. But through trainings across our entire court system, through to new juvenile certification training, to a bench card that's one of the best I've ever seen, to on-demand online trainings for all the different pieces of our court system, to specialized trauma training for all new district court judges, we have made a significant impact on our court system. And one of the things that's ongoing now is we have what's called Safe Babies Court. Now it's based on the National 0 to 3 model, and New Hanover County is one of 5 pilot sites in North Carolina. And we've been doing that work for about a year. And it's a lot like the intensive reunification model that we had created 15 years ago or so that I got recognized for by the National CASA organization. But just transform. It gets me out, not just off the bench, but out of the courtroom. I have judicial status conferences with the family and with the team, which is a check-in, and it's parent and child centered. We have chairs in a circle. There are only 2 saved seats, or maybe 3 in the room, and that's for me and the parents, so that I can sit beside them. I take off my necktie. I don't wear a robe. And we sit and have a conversation. And it's about the issues that they feel led to talk about. I manage the meeting, and if I need information from other participants, then I ask, but otherwise the other participants are there to observe and just and be supportive before and after the meeting. We've actually got our training room decorated with toy boxes, with a bookshelf, with we've got a giant wooden fish that was made by a teenager in one of our at-risk woodworking programs several years ago that the program donated to us. Got some leadership posters on the wall, and our conversations are around 3 words: imagine, believe, and lead. I ask participants to imagine that their life can be better, that they can be back with their children, that they can actually live a full and happy life as a family. I ask them to believe in their personal power to make that happen. And I share some stories about the power of the word believe, both in our faith communities and in the real world, and sometimes even in movies. because there's sometimes that resonates more than real life.
Yes.
Um, and then I ask them to take a leadership role in their own life and the lives of their children and to make it
Right.
happen. And then we check in once a month. Um, we still have our regular court review process, but I'm able to check in with them once a month. They have a family team meeting once a month. In fact, at 2 o'clock today, next floor down, right below my office, family team meeting will be coming together. And then in 2 weeks, I'll see those families for my monthly check in with them. Um, just absolutely incredible work. And if you've got a second, I'll tell you a story about my first one.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
so, mom was incarcerated when she enrolled. Her child was 9 months old when she enrolled, and she had been incarcerated for 7 of those 9 months. The only time that she had seen her baby in person and was able to touch her baby was when she came to court hearings, and I had her handcuffs taken off and let her hold her baby. And her mom, who was the caretaker, was wonderful. She would bring her baby so that she could hold her. So when she came in for her first status conference, she was anxious. She was so nervous, and it had been a month or so since she had held her baby because that had been the last court hearing. And I walked in and shook her hand and asked her if it'd be okay if I sat beside her, and she said please. And so I sat down and we were just chatting for a second. And her mom came in with her son, who's just a beautiful little boy, and handed him to her, and she held him up to her face and whispered, "I hope he remembers me." I think I'm the only person in the room that heard that. And that little boy lit up. His eyes got big and bright. He smiled the most beautiful smile. And I reached over and touched her arm and said, "He remembers." And then we were off on the most wonderful conversation for the next 20 minutes about what her goals were when she got out. She was going to be getting out in a couple of weeks, where she's going to live, where she's going to get her treatment, where she's going to work her recovery. And then she wanted to go on, and then I'm going to do this. And then I said, hang on. Let's talk about the big rocks in your life. And there's an old Boy Scout exercise I used to do where you have big rocks, smaller rocks, pebbles, sand, and then you got a big jar, like a big pickle jar. And the task is get everything in the jar. And then there's a pitcher of water too. Well, if you start with the sand and little rocks, you never get the big rocks in. And if you don't start with the big rocks, then you can never fill the jar. And so I told that story to her and said, let's work on the big rocks.
That's a great analogy.
And when she got out, Steve, first 24 hours out of jail, she had completed one assessment, had scheduled 2 other assessments, and had registered for a supervised living facility here where she could live with her baby within 24 hours. Within 2 weeks, she's at the supervised living facility. And after their initial 2 week period where babies can't join, her baby joined. And that was September last year. And they've been together ever since. And so now she's with him every day. And we're hoping to be able to step out of her life here pretty soon.
Oh, wow.
But just the whole tenor changes. From the adversarial court system to a collaborative, supportive environment. Some of the quotes we've gotten from our moms, particularly our moms, talk about how supported they feel and how valued they feel. And that's a real different kind of emotion than what we get from lots of parents in dependency cases.
Yes. Yes. And I know you had mentioned a moment ago, when you started to share this trauma informed, and you had mentioned, I know that you want to talk about school justice partnership, but I'm glad you're bringing this up because this is actually a perfect segue into that because because the whole school justice partnership is also includes reducing trauma or understanding trauma as one of the reasons for the purpose of the school justice partnership. But before we go into this, I just got to share with my viewers because I had brought up, Tom Tyler and the procedural fairness, and and that I had dubbed it, due process on steroids. There's two things here. It's not only just off the bench, okay, and cultivating and developing this, but there's also that judicial process, and you just described it on the bench, where even though technically you got off the bench and you come down and you sit with these parents, okay, you're still in the courtroom. And how that ties into the procedural fairness is that one of the four factors that are required in a procedural fairness courtroom or like a trauma informed courtroom is voice. The factor is voice. Make sure you give the people in front of you a voice. And I would tell other judges in trainings that I come to either facilitate or present, and it's on this topic of judicial leadership, is that, you know, um, we at a minimum as judges need to ensure that the litigants before us, they've gotten adequate notice, they know why they're in court, and number two, that they have an opportunity to be heard. But the factor of voice, uh, you know, it what it does, it amplifies that opportunity to be heard. Not at a bare minimum. I mean, I don't think it's good enough that we just pat ourselves on the back. Oh, they got to say what they want to say. But when a judge takes those extra steps, that he or she is listen, not just simply listening to them, okay, but speaks in a way that the person knows that we are listening, okay. And what better way, especially in a juvenile court, because I really think juvenile courts lend itself by the very nature of the work that we do as judges, okay, um, to take those steps where we can come down from the bench, take the robe off, come down to their level. That way, their voice is amplified because what it's telling them up here, wow, a judge is coming from the bench, taking the robe off, sitting next to me at the table. That's unheard of for most people, but that amplifies that voice. And what the couple studies that have been done on this procedural fairness has shown, compared to those courts where they were studying that didn't have it, is that a far greater amount of orders are complied with, okay, that people respond very positively. And when they've done the surveys later, after the order's been completed, let's say in this case, a reunification, they'll ask, one of the questions they ask, why did you comply with the order? And the the answer, the most often answered response is, I like the judge. Why? He listened to me, treated me fairly. It was those things. So there's some evidence there in support of any anecdotal stories that we may have. Now, having said that, any comment you have on what I just said?
So I hear from my lawyers who work with me all the time that their clients obviously don't always agree with my decision, but their clients always respect my decisions because they know that I've heard them, and that's huge because we're not in a position to agree with them all the time. We're not in the business of just giving them what they want, but we have to hear them, we have to value them, and let them know that, because then we're more likely to get their compliance. And some of the way that pays off, Steve, we 2016, the opioid epidemic hit New Hanover County, gangbusters. Castlight Health did a study that determined that Wilmington, New Hanover County, was number one in America for prescription opioid abuse.
Mm.
I had parents dying in my caseload. I had more and more babies coming into care because of parental overdoses, NAS babies, sometimes mom overdosing in the hospital after delivering. And I started having to have some really hard conversations, emotional conversations with moms in particular who had overdosed. And I would go through the initial rites with them, make sure they had their lawyer in place, that they knew how to contact their lawyer, that they had, ask them about place to stay, ask them about where they were going to work their recovery. And then I would circle back after finishing speaking to everybody else and say, look, I'm worried about you. Are you okay today? Where are you connected for recovery? Will you promise me that you'll get back there today and see somebody? And will you promise me to stay alive until I see you next week? Will you make that promise to me? And she would say yes. And then the next week, I would ask her how her recovery went in the last week, and I would ask her again to promise me to stay alive until next week, because I want to see you. I want to take this journey with you. I want to work on reunification with you. And I've got a group of moms that I call my promise keepers that not only kept their promise to stay alive, but worked their reunification plan and got their babies back.
Wow.
So that's it was important for me to make a connection so that they knew I knew how much pain they were in, but that they knew that I cared about them and that it was important to me that they be successful and they stay alive. I think that's taking the voice to that's like a voice on steroids, I think.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Um,
And may I ask you this? Now, I would take it then, like these other couple studies that I had mentioned, that your reunification rates have increased.
yes,
Can you talk about that for a moment?
sure. So I'll say we have the best reunification rates of any metropolitan county in North Carolina. I'll also say that I want to do better. Um, you know, the when the leading causes of removal are substance use, mental health, and domestic violence, it's tough to
Yeah.
get people back together. Um, and so I'm proud of where our rates are in comparison to other metropolitan districts, but I'm motivated to continue to work to make it better. And I think we're only a year. We started our status conferences last September and last August for Safe Babies Court. So I'm hoping that that's going to have an impact on our reunification. The goal is for Safe Babies Court in North Carolina not just to spread statewide as a new way of supplementing dependency court, but actually change the way we do child welfare work
Yeah.
to make it more collaborative. So that's the hope. And I think if we can get there, then we'll see reunification rates change all over the state.
Yeah. Well,
And
you see, go ahead.
I used to I used to joke and I know we're going to get there in a minute, but I was thrilled when we started a school justice partnership here, right?
Uh-huh.
And never in my wildest dreams would I believe that we'd be talking about going statewide. So now when I think about work happening statewide, it's not impossible, and so we're having those kind of conversations about Safe Baby Court that we had about school justice partnerships 10 years ago.
Yes. Yes. Well, and I want the viewers to know that this program, Justice Redesigned, is justice I'm applying in a very broad way. What I've just heard, Jay, is that on the dependency side, you are in your system, collaborative system, you're delivering justice to kids who deserve to be with their moms and or dads. That we all know that's the best place for them as long as it's safe. And if collaboratively y'all can make it a safe place and can return those kids are in a place better off.
And the sooner that happens, the better, because we know the brain science with those babies.
Right.
Brain is growing at the fastest rate in their entire life, and the all the connections are being made. The physical growth of the brain is happening, and for for that baby to be in a stable and safe and secure environment is so important, and for it to be with mom or dad or both is even more important. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we lives are literally at stake, and I think we don't focus on that enough. But because of our work with the ACEs task force, we spend a lot of time looking at childhood trauma and the dramatic effects on the adult brain and body as a result of what happens in our childhood, and that has just really brought home the significance of what we do.
Yeah. So let's take all of this that we've learned so far and apply it to the School Justice Partnership. But let's begin with letting our viewers understand. Can you define School Justice Partnership in your words?
Sure. So, school justice partnerships are about a community coming together across systems to find ways to keep kids in school and out of court and off the streets. It's about identifying root causes of behavior in school and using a disciplinary model to address behavior when and where it happens instead of putting that behavior out of school. I think that's the best summary I can give.
Yes.
Um,
Now, you were part of was it a North Carolina delegation or local delegation that traveled to New York City in 2012 when Judge Kay convened that national conference?
that I was part of a state delegation. Elizabeth Trosh in Mecklenburg County was there, and then a data person from um, uh, Department of Public Instruction who never quite understood why they were there. Um, but Elizabeth and I uh, became keenly aware of why we were there because both of us came back and began this work.
Yes, yes. And so, is it safe to say that it is at that national convening was the first you heard from about a school justice partnership?
Yes, and it's the reason that my chief justice asked me to attend was that I was a very active school volunteer and leader. I spent 25 years up until COVID opening car doors or directing traffic at schools
I
every day,
remember.
and and she knew about that, and so she knew I'd been a PTA president multiple times at multiple schools and had volunteered in multiple other capacities, and so when the information about this convening came from Chief Justice Kay, um, uh, Sarah Parker, our then Chief Justice, put me on that delegation, which changed my life, Steve, because that work, as you know in your life, is so transformative, impacts so many people, and then to have a chance to be a part of trying to implement it statewide, plus being lucky enough to go to other jurisdictions um, with Georgetown when they were working that certificate program has just been transformative in my career, and then was a stepping stone really for the ACEs task force because Ben David was an active partner in our school justice partnership, and as we started talking about trauma, we both realized that the work we had done starting in 2013 after that conference was all about trauma and being trauma informed. Um,
Yes.
so yeah, and I got to meet you in 2012.
I know. It's been a great ride or road ever since for both of us, because you and I have spent some time together,
Yeah.
on the road, so to speak, and speaking together, on this topic. In fact, there's times I've called upon you when I can't go. Uh, you were the one. You were my go-to person when I had a conflict. I said, no, I know someone, okay, who is going to hit the nail on the head, okay, and deliver, and you always have. But let's get into the details. Let's start home. When what exactly did y'all do, okay, at home in creating this type of partnership?
So I came back, bought my superintendent of schools a cup of coffee. He was a new superintendent, and I knew he loved coffee, so I bought him a cup of coffee and shared the idea with him. And then Sandy Hook happened, and Ben David, my DA, convened um, a Safer Schools task force and asked me to chair it. And we spent a year looking at how to make our schools safer. So that sort of derailed us getting started with our collaborative on SJPs in particular. But one of the outcomes of that task force was that if we can engage in school justice partnership work, our schools will become safer just because of that work. And as I've done presentations, sometimes to audiences that are not necessarily supportive of doing the work, I've emphasized the safety piece. My mom was a school teacher. She was an English teacher. She was the teacher who went the extra mile for her kids. Even after she retired, she wrote quiz bowl questions for the school. She retired because she was afraid, because behavior was so out of control, and her teacher in a room next to hers got beat up one day, and she said, I can't deal with this. When we have an opportunity to identify and address root cause of behavior and change that behavior for the better, then we're making the school safer. If we push that behavior out of school and pretend that suspension is going to positively change behavior, or pretend that a court referral, when that court case is going to get done 60 or 90 days down the road, when that teenage brain can't even connect back to the behavior, then we're kidding ourselves.
Right.
And so we're actually making schools less safe by using exclusionary practices than we are with keeping kids in school when there's not a safety concern.
So for the viewers and helping them wrap their head around this, so if we know that exclusionary, and there's very strong evidence to support that, the inappropriate application of exclusionary disciplinary practices will lead kids to dropping out of school, okay, not finishing school, which certainly cannot be a good thing when it comes to public safety in our community, because we know that there is a direct correlation, a statistically significant relationship between education, graduating high school, and crime rates. Okay. All right. Now, having said that, help them understand, okay, so if you're not referring them to the court and you're not going, and of course, keep in mind, we're not talking about every delinquent act that occurs that happening. Only your minor misdemeanor ones, okay, that zero tolerance led schools to start inappropriately using school police to arrest these kids who were really not delinquents. They're just kids doing stupid things, okay? But what did y'all do? Because my viewers are going to be thinking, okay, if you're not doing that, then how are you responding? What are you doing anything in lieu of that?
Sure. So the key for us, and it was based on your model that I'll call the Teskey model, because that's what we had a commission on the administration of law and justice that looked at this issue, and that's what they looked to, was the Teskey model and the work we were doing in New Hanover County. But that model includes a graduated response model. So you don't go to harshest at hello. But you look at what resources you have in your individual schools or within your system to respond to behavior. Our schools at the time were using PBIS, Positive Behavior Intervention and Support Model, which isn't just an educational model; it's a behavior model. But they weren't using the behavior side of it with the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 behaviors, and so we encouraged and supported the use of that behavior modification model. And there are lots of ways to discipline kids that don't have to involve what I would call punishment.
Right.
I mean, the root of the word discipline is to teach. And I've always really liked that, because our goal is to teach different behavior, not just indiscriminately punish. And so, we have school resource officers working with kids doing community service at the school. And sometimes not necessarily picking up trash, doing sometimes very constructive things. We had trainings done for teachers who were calling the law to the classroom too much. And a good friend that you met, Judy Stubblefield, who was our behavioral specialist at the time that we did our work with you, Judy developed a program called Why Call 911. And she would, without necessarily identifying it, would look for the teachers who are making the most calls, get them in the room, and would start the conversation by, why did you call 911?
Oh,
And,
that's
and, and,
good.
then the teacher would say, I didn't call 911. And she said, you call the law. That's calling 911. Let's talk about what you could have done differently for that kid who was throwing a pencil. And so really doing a dive into classroom management and then looking at involving administrators. Administrators love working with kids, and they felt in some ways compelled because of zero tolerance practices to put kids out, and you know, and they became incredibly creative about how to respond to behaviors. Truth is that sometimes sitting kids down in a principal's office and having an honest conversation to them about behavior and consequences is all it takes. If you got two boys who got in a fight over a girl who still want to have lunch together the same day, that's not a referral to court and 10 days out of school.
Right.
Can we talk about how stupid this is? Moment, right? But those boys were being put out of school. So we developed a graduated response model, and our schools were great partners in that. Our first interagency agreement, had a great graduated response chart, and we encouraged, as we did trainings for principals and assistant principals, that they look at the resources they had in their school, look at the personalities they had in their school, and who can really bring it with kids.
Mm.
Who's making the connections with kids, and let's make those connections and work through and looked at. So the graduated response model was the secret for us, and that's actually been it's actually in our toolkit, our statewide toolkit.
Yeah. So when when I first got involved in this in my judicial circuit in 2003, um, and brought everyone together, one of the things that we discovered that police were they got themselves involved in, okay, pretty much at the encouragement of the administrators in the schools, was to enforce school rules. I mean, kids weren't breaking the law, okay? And one of the most common enforcement of those rules was that, there's a rule that you can't wear hats, in the school. And so let's say Johnny would get off the bus, the officer would be there at the front of the door, kids would come in, and they would tell kids who were wearing hats to take them off. But then you'd have one of those kids, okay, who, ignores the officer. But what does the officer do? The officer can't handle that. The officer gets upset, follows Johnny, and demands that he removes it. And then says, if you don't remove it, I'm going to remove it. Okay. You know, next thing he goes to remove it, and Johnny may slap his hand off, like that. Now he's getting arrested. Okay. You know, for attacking a police officer, when none of this should have gotten to that place, and because the system was allowing that type of behavior. So what had happened after we did cross training, after we signed our agreement, is that this is what the police do now. They see Johnny, and they'll say to Johnny, "Hey Johnny, you forgot to remove your hat. I think the principal's around the corner, just looking out for you." Okay. What does that do? That then begins to change the relationship between the police and the students, where now the students begin to go to the school resource officers when they have issues, when they have problems. Or guess what? They happen to come across school safety intelligence, and now they feel more comfortable sharing that. And I won't tell the story, but we do have an incident a long time after this school justice partnership, as we saw more information going toward police. One happened to be a planned school shooting.
So
Yeah.
we had one of those that wasn't necessarily planned, but was about to happen, and it was either going to be a suicide or a murder suicide, and because of the relationships that the SROs had built with the kids. Some kids went to the SRO and told them about it, and they were able to defuse it and actually get the gun and save a life, at
Yeah.
least one.
And that's what I want my viewers to really understand is that there are sometimes things that may look soft on crime that are in fact very tough on crime. The results are school safety increases with this type of an approach because it's very strategic. Okay. Now, do you not have a 2 o'clock thing you have to get to?
No, I don't. I don't.
Okay. Okay. I
I'm
want to
set.
make sure. Okay. Okay.
I'm set.
So
And let me say a word about that. Your last
absolutely.
point. When Ben and I have been out, Ben David, my former DA, and I have been out either on the school justice partnership circuit or on our trauma informed courts circuit. Uh, it's not about being soft on crime. It's about being smart on crime.
Hmm.
It's about actually understanding what we need to deal with, understanding what happened to you that is contributing to what you did. Because if we don't understand the what happened to you piece of it, then we're never going to be effective in responding to the what did you do moment,
Yeah.
ever.
Right.
And so the tough on crime in the moment looks, impressive. Judges can thump their chest and prosecutors can thump their, look what I did, and then the person continues to get in trouble and get in trouble and get in trouble. So what did you really do? What did you really accomplish? Nothing. By being smart about it, not only do we have an opportunity to change behavior, but we save our powder for the serious cases where we need court time to really prosecute people who are doing bad things. That's about being smart. Don't waste the resources on things that we can solve in the principal's office. Let's save our powder for the time when the prosecutor's office really needs to be involved.
And it's because that reminds me, before I convened everyone, I had a case. It was a trial of a case. It was a school fight. Okay, charged the kid. Um, you know, and in the cross examination, of the kid, the public defender was asking, said, "So how are you two today?" "Oh, we're friends." "Okay, all right." You know, so when it was all over with, I asked the young man. I said, "Have you learned a lesson from this?" He goes, "Yes." And he said, "What's that?" And he responded, "Well, number one, violence isn't going to solve anything. In fact, my mom and dad let me know that because I got punished when I got home." Okay, Well, having laid all that stuff out, and that really, it made me think in that moment after I adjourned the matter. I told the kid, I said, "You're not a delinquent. I'm not going to waste my resources putting you on probation. That's just going to make you worse because then I increase the risk. You're going to be intermingling with all the high risk, serious cases, kids who are carrying guns, kids who are in gangs. I don't want you to meet those kids and spend time with them." Okay. So this is a waste of time. Just consider this an admonishment, and I'm going to clear your record on this. Okay. Well, I asked the prosecutor to stay. And let me tell you, he and I ended up, we ended up great friends. Okay. Um, but back then he was doing what he felt a prosecutor needed to do, and he was young in the job as well. Okay. Um, but I asked him, I was standing on the bench, got up, I said, "Chris," I said, "I just want you to know something. You did a great job today. That 3 years of hard study at law school, I mean, it came through today. You were remarkable. And having to study for the bar and the anxiety of going through that, waiting on the test results to come back. I mean, all that time you spent on all this in your life to get where you are today, to do this today." And he said, "Judge, what are you really trying to say?" Because, and I said, it, it's in a question, Chris. Do you think your time could have been spent better off up in your office getting ready for that armed robbery trial, getting ready for that, aggravated assault with injuries, with the kid who is high risk, who we know is a public safety issue and needs to be addressed?" And he goes, "You're right. I do have a lot of cases, and this does waste my time." And that's how I sold him on this. Okay.
Yeah, so it has enabled us to create a culture where our juvenile prosecutor really takes a hard look at what she's going to do, and she does. In the 2 years that I've had her working with me, she's done more deferred prosecution agreements than probably all of my years working in juvenile court put together.
Wow. Yeah.
Because she, even though she wasn't on board for our school justice partnership work, she knows about it. She knows about our trauma work. She completely buys into it. But then she also prosecutes the gun cases. She follows the gun cases that start in juvenile and go to superior where they're tried as adults. And she's tough, tough as nails.
Yeah.
Top 10 in her law school class, smart as a whip, great presenter of evidence. I tried a death by vehicle case with her 2 weeks ago. Took all day, but she has a firm grasp on what kids need to be adjudicated and what kids don't.
Don't. Yes. Yeah. The ones we're scared of, and the ones that we're not. Okay.
Right.
But let me ask you this. So, since up implementing the school justice partnership, have you seen have you seen an increase in graduation rates, or at least increase in attendance rates?
Yes, pre-COVID, attendance rates were better and graduation rates were up. Dropout rates were down. I've used your quote over and over again. Who would have thought that by keeping kids in school, we can increase graduation rates? And it works. And so at our when we signed our second SJP after 3 years. So first one was signed in 2015, 2018. We re-signed. Our Chief Justice came down for the signing ceremony. Virtually every elected official in New Hanover County was present. The entire Board of Education, the entire Board of Commissioners, our Director of DSS, our Director of Public Health, the mayor, members of City Council. I mean, you name it, they came. And our superintendent of schools said at that signing ceremony that graduation rates were up because of good work being done in the schools and because we were keeping kids in school with our school justice partnership.
Wow, wow. And as I had noted earlier, and you confirmed that the research, it also shows that the more kids who are graduating, the fewer kids that are committing crimes.
So one of the studies that was done as part of our Chief Justice's Commission on the Administration of Law and Justice that was looking at raise the age in North Carolina saw raising the age and keeping kids in juvenile court as opposed to adult court, and with school justice partnership, keeping kids in school and out of court would lead to higher graduation rates on both counts, which would not only have a positive climate effect on our community, but a positive economic effect on our communities. Because more kids who graduate are more likely to be employed in meaningful occupations throughout their life. And that's significant because we know that kids who end up being incarcerated end up being dropouts.
Yeah.
And kids who end up being dropouts end up selling drugs on our streets and carrying guns on our streets. Not all of them, but certainly increases the odds of that because our streets are an equal opportunity employer.
So what we're realizing over time is not only increasing school safety through the application of the school justice partnership, but this ends up resonating out in the community because we're graduating more kids, therefore fewer kids committing crimes, therefore there's fewer. I like to put it this way: we now have fewer victims.
That's exactly right. And and pre-COVID, and I'll probably say that again before we're off. Pre-COVID, our juvenile crime rates were down. They're still down and still falling. It's just our gun crime is up dramatically, which is a direct outcome of COVID and the isolation of COVID and kids being out of school.
Yeah, that's national. Those are national statistics too. The judge who I recommended and was appointed to replace me, okay, is now the chief judge, and she confers. In fact, just last week she called me to run run an idea. And then one of her colleagues, she had one of her colleagues call me. I'm to help her with developing a family treatment court, accountability court there. But she was mentioning that she started a gun court, okay, or it's really kind of a violence court, but it targets kids with possession of weapons like that, okay, and it's
Yeah,
up, she said.
yeah, we're looking for money for that right now. I think we found it. There's a great handgun diversion program out of the Denver, Colorado DA's office that
Hmm.
we're looking at replicating, and really brings an intensive look about consequences. It's a 6 week process. There's a program one night a week that involves a meal for juvenile and family. Um, bring in guest speakers, for example, an emergency room doctor to talk about what gunshot wounds look like and how they have to treat them. Bring in a police officer to talk about the significant risks of guns on the streets and when they get out with people who have guns. Bring in a mom who's lost a kid to gun violence. You know, so 5 weeks of programming, um, to try to help kids understand more and maybe get into that teenage brain a little bit to shift thinking. And then a week where the kids all do a presentation about something they've learned.
Yeah, that's good.
Um, and so Denver's been doing it for a number of years. They've had some real good success. And so we're looking at doing it here. And I'm hopeful to get that started in the next few months because and I've got my elected prosecutor on board with that. Um,
Yeah. I
we
would
just,
I would tell kids in front of me that a gun possession, but also in home burglaries. I tell them, I know that you broke into that home thinking no one was there, but that doesn't happen in every case. There could be somebody working late shift, they're asleep, they've been working hard, they don't hear the noises right away. You get in, you wake them up, they have a gun next to them, and they're going to shoot you. Okay. And next thing you know, they're calling your mama here down to Southern Regional Hospital, down to the basement, to the morgue to identify your body. I want you to think about what is going on here and how this is being processed by your mama, how she's hurt, you're dead. Okay. And then I would share them. I said, look, I was 10 years law enforcement. Okay. We had a saying, okay, you know, that we'd rather be tried by 12 of our peers than carried by six of our uh, friends. Okay. Um, you point a gun at me, I'm going to shoot you. And, we are trained to shoot to kill at the chest level because when we in law enforcement go out to requalify on the range, we got to prove that we can shoot well. And why do we do that? It's not because we want to kill you, it's because we're not that good at aiming at a leg. Okay, we're not
right.
that good at aiming at an arm. I mean, we want to go home to our wives, our husbands, our girlfriends, our boyfriends, to our children. Okay, give us a break, cut us some slack here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would, yeah. And so that's the hand. It's that these kids are kids. They're not thinking about that, those type of things. But let me ask you this. So I understand um, that you helped before it went statewide. There's a little middle story here that there are some other colleagues of yours in other judicial circuits that took note of this and interest, and I think they wanted to also grow a school justice partnership. Is that right? Did I remember this right?
That's right. So, in advance of Raise the Age, I had multiple other districts reach out to me and want to do the work when they heard about what we were doing. Because I started talking about it when chiefs would get together. I talked about it
Mhm.
and said, "Hey guys, you won't believe you won't believe how good this is." And so I went to several different jurisdictions who started it almost right away. So and are still doing it and doing it well. Um, and then ultimately, um, when the Commission on the Administration of Law and Justice made a recommendation to the General Assembly about raising the age in North Carolina, because North Carolina sadly was the last state in America to raise the juvenile age of adult jurisdiction from 16 to 18. Um, one of the big reasons that it happened finally was school justice partnerships. The commission recommended it for all of the good reasons about brain science and fair treatment of kids and this and that. But at the end of the day, money was the barrier, and money had always been the barrier. And what our Sheriff's Association and what our Prosecutors Association took note of is that if we're referring less kids to court, raise the age isn't going to cost as much.
Right.
And so that predicted cost savings was in that final commission report. And my administrative office of the courts says in the public facing information that successful statewide implementation of school justice partnerships is an important component to the successful implementation of North Carolina's Raise the Age legislation.
Wow.
I walk into rooms where people say, "Way to go, Dad! You're the father of Raise the Age in North Carolina because you finally tipped the scales."
Yep.
With school justice partnerships. And who would have thought? Because Steve, in 2017, when the legislation was going to come up again, and this is after 20 years of working, of advocates coming together all over the state and pushing, study after study saying it's right. Every single bill that was introduced about Raise the Age in 2017 included a school justice partnership model. Wow. Every single one. And the final bill included a directive to the director of the administrative office of the courts to get chief district court judges to convene school justice partnerships across North Carolina.
Yeah, when you told me that's how it was going to unfold, I thought, man, this is a great idea. And in subsequent conversations that I would have with state leaders regarding the school justice partnership, I always pointed to North Carolina. I said, that's a model right there, how they use the administrative office of the courts, okay? And that it just makes sense because the system's already in place to have the chief judges be responsible for convening the folks in the judicial circuit. And then y'all have that practice guide that, I appreciate whenever y'all redo it, you always send me a courtesy copy with a very nice, cover letter. To those out there who are in some leadership position involving juvenile justice, or it doesn't have to be, you could be a chief of police, the school superintendent, you can have co-champions, doesn't have to be one champion. But I would definitely look at the practice guide that North Carolina has put together. It's excellent. It even has a template agreement in there. Okay, I think you all even use, I think, at least one of my tools from my toolkit that kind of help facilitate. I don't know whether it's focus acts or graduated responses, but anyway, it doesn't matter. But it's just so well written, and just the steps are so logical. Yeah.
So, and that's available online, Steve. And for your listeners, we've got a dedicated website for our school justice partnership work. It's nccourts.gov/SJP. And on that website is information about our school justice partnerships, our toolkit, fact sheet, all kinds of other resources, including a dedicated email address where people can ask questions about our work. And we've got a dedicated person at our administrative office of the courts who will respond.
Wow. And you know what? I got to tell you this. So I've been teaching 4 years here at the local college, Pima Community College. Very large student population. It's a feeder school to the University of Arizona here in Tucson. I teach criminal justice classes as well as business law. Okay. Anyway, one of the classes I teach is juvenile justice procedures. And I have a module titled Police in Schools. Okay. And you're featured. I have one of your videos. Okay. All right. Professionally done. And so then I have them do it. I ask these questions. Okay. So I have in-class version and the online one, but either one I show my power. So I have you embedded in a PowerPoint when I'm teaching in class, face to face, and then I have you embedded on the online course. Okay, and it's just a great description of school justice partnerships and how y'all implement. You may not remember the one I'm talking about. Yeah.
So there are several. When I retire, Steve, I'm going to live on because I've recorded, I don't know, 3 or 4 school justice partnership videos, and now I've recorded probably a dozen different videos connected to our ACES informed courts work and custody mediation. I was just looking back. We did 2 statewide videos for school justice partnerships. The second one was really an update, but also because we had a new chief justice, and that voice needed to be in the video instead of a former chief justice. But both very powerful. And you know, when one of the things that I tried to say in both those videos, when we started this work, I thought about impacting dozens of kids, and then all of a sudden, it's an opportunity to impact the lives of thousands of kids.
Yeah.
And if you've got the opportunity to have that kind of impact, why wouldn't you want to do the work?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's it's anecdotal, but one of the products of the type of system that you're talking about that you've just described, uh, you know, is the benefactor of not only the school justice partnership, but another type of accountability court that I had. We don't have time to go into, but this young man had committed a very serious offense, was facing 10 years at age 15, was facing mandatory minimum of 10 years in the adult system, who was a violator of one of our 7 deadly sins. We called it in Georgia, where you bypass juvenile court and go straight to adult court. The district attorney used to be a juvenile court judge. She didn't, when she looked over um, this young man's record, but not only that, but beyond that, uh, school stuff and all that, realized this is a really smart kid. I just can't, I just don't, I can't do this to him 10 years. So she called me up and asked me if I send him to you, because there's ability to transfer to juvenile court, where then I would give him 5 years, the maximum, because we had what's called a designated felony law, where there's about 32 or anything transferred from adult court that I can give 1 to 5 years, and there's no parole, by the way. If I give you 5 years, it's 5 years, okay? But she at least wanted it cut down in half, okay? And I said sure, sent it on over. But then the probation officer who does the background on this is noticing the same thing, can see the moment that he joined a gang, okay, all right, straight A student, all of a sudden D's and F's, okay, very articulate, very smart. Well, I had already developed a program for designated felons anyway, and I thought he would be safe despite what he did. But the community expects us to be tough when we on a crime that is a violent crime, right? Okay, I get that, but when you're talking about kids, you also have to be careful. But I had this program, so I called up the DA. She said, "Sure, go ahead." Okay, because she liked this program, all right, because it had a recidivist rate of only 17%, whereas the kids who go on to youth prisons have a 65% recidivist rate.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'll stop right there. The kid went on, graduated high school, got his bachelor's degree, went on to get his master's degree in cybersecurity. Okay, and now he's in cybersecurity. He's now 30 years old, and he just came to Tucson to spend a week with my wife and I. Okay, and he told me, he said, I never thought that the judge who sentenced me, okay, I'd be calling him by his first name, and sitting out on his porch, rocking in a chair and having a conversation just about life in general. And I just want not just viewers, but anyone else who may themselves have suffered trauma in their life, and you know, and that there is the system can be designed to to be positive to the extent that people don't necessarily have to go to prison, but we can keep the community safe. Now, keep in mind, there's some that we have to send. All right? I mean, it is what it is. That's life. Okay, But if the system is taking an awfully good, careful look at its own system, where there can be release valves where they're appropriate, which is what you've done. So well, I know before we go, two things. You went down to your state house, state senate, whatever and you testified on Raise the Age, but specific to the School Justice Partnership. Is that correct?
I did.
Yeah. That was How did that go? I mean, what was the reception like?
So Ben, David, and I were the only two people that were invited. My DA, my former DA, who was, as I mentioned, was a great partner in doing this work. We were given 3 minutes each, and I told the members how long I had been a judge. At that point, it was 27 years. So this is the most important 3 minutes in my career, if that brings perspective.
Wow.
Because that was the most impactful, having the ability to speak to them about the importance of Raise the Age, the potential cost savings and other benefits of school justice partnerships, even though it was only 3 minutes, was was the apex for me. No more, no greater opportunity for impact than those 3 minutes in my career. I got to go back because as part of Raise the Age, the General Assembly convened a juvenile jurisdiction advisory committee, and I was appointed by the Speaker of the House to be on that committee. And the purpose of the group was to advise the General Assembly on updates or supplements or changes or funding issues as Raise the Age was implemented. And we worked from 2000, I think early 2018 till 2023. And I chaired a committee that was known as the Minimum Age Subcommittee. Also chaired School Justice Partnership Subcommittee. But the Minimum Age Subcommittee was designed to look at what our minimum age of jurisdiction in North Carolina was, because for all of my life, age 6 has been our minimum age.
Wow.
And there was recognition by the members of our full committee that needed to change. And so we launched an international study on minimum ages across the world and learned that North Carolina had the lowest minimum age in the world. Not just that resonates in a different way than when you just say lowest age in the country. When you say lowest age in the world, that really
It does.
adds emphasis. And we were successful in a just under a 2-year period with getting minimum age raised from 6 to 10, and
Okay.
also creating for the first time in history a juvenile capacity standard in North Carolina
Okay.
that actually takes into account child development, brain development, other issues that seem logical, but that are important when you're dealing with kids instead of adults. And our kids have been evaluated for capacity on the adult standard for my whole career. And so we were able to get a juvenile capacity standard enacted, and then created a remediation process for the first time in history in North Carolina as well. So some magical moments for me with working with my partners at the General Assembly through that Juvenile Jurisdiction Advisory Committee to really affect some pretty sweeping change for kids.
Yeah, that's great. Wow. So, before we go, um, is there anything else that you would like, my viewers to know? Um, maybe we'll call it as we do, our as lawyers do, our closing argument or statement.
Sure. So, I want to share one other thing, and then I'll start my closing with
Okay,
permission of the court.
absolutely. Granted.
Thank you. So, when Raise the Age was passed in 2017, there was a almost 2 year delay in implementation. So it was enacted in 2017, but December 1, 2019 was our implementation date, which created a gap for 16 and 17-year-olds where they were still going to be charged as adults. And a friend who is then the chief district court judge in Durham County here in North Carolina had started a program called Misdemeanor Diversion Program, which was a pre-arrest diversion program for nonviolent misdemeanors. And we were able to convince our county to fund a misdemeanor diversion program here for 16 and 17-year-olds so that they would have the benefit of not being arrested as adults for minor offenses. Later, the state took care of an expunction process for kids 16 and 17 who were convicted during that time on adult charges, but this was proactively pre-arrest. And by the way, it was a tool that worked hand in hand with school justice partnership because school resource officers were one of our leading sources of referral. And so we were able to offer that to kids 16 and 17. And then in 2019, when the Raise the Age law became effective, our county was willing to expand it. And now we include 15 to 21. So we take in our high school age kids and our college age kids, all with pre-arrest diversion for minor nonviolent misconduct. We have saved athletic scholarships. We've saved academic scholarships.
Absolutely.
We have saved kids with, we used to talk about the felony tag, of what the scarlet letter F means in your life for felony. But in truth, an arrest for a simple misdemeanor can be a tag for life too, even if there's no conviction. And so we've been offering that ever since 2017 or early 2018, and really serve kids. An example, I know y'all don't have prom parties in Georgia or in but we do here. And the kids are always surprised when the cops get out with them because they're making too much noise.
Right.
And they all used to get arrested for those alcohol offenses, including having fake IDs and all that goes with drinking underage. Well, we have had entire house parties referred to our misdemeanor diversion program.
Well,
Instead of getting charged,
right.
they're coming to our misdemeanor diversion program and learning about both direct and collateral consequences.
Yes.
So that's a piece that supplemented our school justice partnerships and supported it, and is something else we've done here to try to help protect kids from their own teenage brains.
Yeah, and just in case the viewers aren't quite, there's some that are not familiar with juvenile justice systems or the criminal justice system, is that in y'all's situation, you got creative, understanding that you have 16 and 17-year-olds who are in the schools but are not benefiting from the school justice partnership because they're being arrested as adults. And so y'all got creative and created the misdemeanor deferral. Wow. Okay.
So closing statement. You loved your career as a judge, and I certainly have loved my career. In 1991, I would not have ever claimed to have a vision for where I am today. But I got to where I am today because about 15 years ago, I learned to read, which was really a profound thing for me to learn to read. And I have college students who I'm talking to, who may be interning with me, and I share that with them, and they say, "What? You learned to read?" Well, I learned to read about the things that bring people to me.
Yeah.
I learned to read, and it really started with mental health issues, but quickly became exclusionary school discipline. I learned to read after I met you in 2012. I learned to read about the harmful impacts of exclusionary school discipline and court referrals. I learned to read about the school to prison pipeline. I learned to read more about substance misuse and the power of addiction in the lives of the people that come to me, and about the barriers they face. I learned to read about mental health issues and the challenges that mental health professionals face in providing treatment to folks who are affected by any number of mental health illnesses. I learned to read about the incredible burden that comes with living in poverty and the impact that being unhoused can have on a person's life. I learned to read about trauma, and whether it's adverse childhood experiences or adverse community environments, or whether it's the trauma of being a victim of domestic abuse or sexual assaults over time. I learned to read about all those things and more, and that has transformed me as a person and as a judge. So I commend reading to anybody that's listening. I've got a virtual library of books on trauma on my conference table behind me that I'm in various stages of reading. It's important for the person who sits at the front of the room to understand the issues that bring
Wow.
people. Because if we don't understand the issues that bring
All
people, we're
right.
not able
Well,
to serve them.
Jay,
And
thanks
from my
again. And to my
perspective,
viewers, I
I
hope
serve
you've
the
taken
people
a
that come
lot
to
in
me.
here and
I work for
walking
them.
away and
Judges are
hoping
elected in
that
North Carolina.
you'll
That means I work for
imagine
the people. I
how
work for we the
justice should
people.
work and what maybe you
And
can
if I
do
can't
where you are to
understand what they're going
bring
through, if I can't
justice
understand what they're
to your
suffering through,
community.
then I'm not
Until
going to be
the
able to
next
help them and
episode,
effectively
everyone
serve
take
them.
care.
And so one of the greatest
Now,
joys of my life has been learning to
okay,
read,
thanks, Jay.
and then being able to be more effective in working with the people that I serve.